For all of Dexter's flaws, managing to find companionship wasn't one of them. Whether it's a romance or a bromance, in every season of the show, Dexter reels another person into his unbelievably dangerous life. Starting a relationship is easy enough for him, but keeping one going, that part always trips him up. Today we are looking at why all of Dexter's relationships have failed, and why they were basically destined to do so from the very beginning, starting with the first girl he ever dated, Sofia Rivera. Sophie and Dexter had the shortest relationship he would ever be in, but their history is still important to understanding his future dating habits. Dexter had just started out as a killer when he and Sofia got together. She was interested in Dexter first, and of course he barely noticed any of the hints she was dropping. It seemed pretty hopeless at first, but with a little nudging from Deb, they actually ended up dating for a little while. When he was with Sofia, we got a glimpse of the kind of partner Dexter would be moving forward with. She was basically like a trial run for how things would go with Rita years later. Dexter was still learning how to make a relationship seem believable. He was still years away from being convincing a boyfriend. In fact, to make their first date go well, Dexter had to use pointers he picked up from Levi Reed, a murderer he was vetting at the time. It worked like a charm, but his attentiveness in the relationship didn't last long. Sophia did her best to keep Dexter's attention, but he was distracted by his dark passenger, which Harry had just recently let off the leash. Soon, Dexter was preoccupied with satisfying his urge and ignoring calls and pages from Sophia as if she was less than an afterthought. Unlike Rita, Sophia wasn't about to stand for Dexter's shifty behavior and weak explanation. After about a week of him ignoring her messages, she confronted him in person. He tried lying his way out of everything, saying he had been busy with work when really he had been busy killing Levi and destroying evidence of Tony Ferrer's murder, which he also committed. Sophia bought it for all of about 10 seconds until she saw an open condom wrapper on the floor of Dexter's truck. It was from the garbage site where he dumped Levi's body, but he couldn't tell her that, and she wasn't buying the idea that it was from a crime scene at a swamp. Sophia immediately assumed that Dexter was cheating on her and dumped him on the spot. It was still an unpleasant experience, but he barely even seemed to care. It may have helped him blend in better. Something that Harry taught him was very important from a young age, but Dexter just wasn't as invested in the relationship Sophia was. It was the first instance of Dexter's dark passenger getting in the way of a normal relationship with a nice girl, and it set the tone for almost every relationship he would be in after that. This was his first go at it, so he was understandably a bit sloppy, just like with his first kill. But with age and experience, Dexter got better at lying to all of the people in his life and covering up his late-night activities, just like with his first kill. Without realizing it, Sophia positioned herself as the first stepping stone in Dexter's journey to learning what kind of partner he would be. Unfortunately for her, that meant she got a lying, conniving killer for a boyfriend, and she would never fully understand why he treated her the way he did. The confusion and heartbreak she felt is something many of the people who would try to get close to Dexter in the future would experience for themselves in due time. Rita Bennett and Dexter had a complicated relationship. At times, Dexter genuinely tried to be a good partner and father, but his secret life constantly undermined the stability Rita deserved. Dexter put in a good effort. He really seemed to want to be there for her, but his dark passenger was always more important. Still, he had some standout moments as a partner to Rita. For example, when Dexter decided to take care of Rita's abusive husband, Paul, he really did her a huge favor. In fact, it was one of his most positive contributions he ever made to Rita's life. Paul's violence and instability had left Rita deeply traumatized, and after he was released from prison, he started coming around and messing with her in any way he could. He'd take the kids without telling her, show up to her house unexpectedly, tried to position himself as the fun parent, making her look bad in comparison. He gaslit her about it all the whole time. Dexter stepped in to shield her and the kids from him when he could, but Paul was relentless. Dexter was showing restraint at first, but Paul took it a step too far when he attacked Rita and tried to rape her. He tried to frame her for spousal abuse and take full custody of Aster and Cody. Dexter wanted to kill Paul for what he was doing to Rita, but he didn't fit the code, and Dexter didn't want to hurt the kids any more than necessary. So instead of killing Paul, Dexter got him rearrested by staging a scene to make it look like he started using heroin again, breaking his probation. This seemed like the easiest way to permanently remove him from Rita's life legally. He also helped stabilize Rita's household in smaller but meaningful ways. Like when one of the criminals Paul knew stole Rita's car to cover a debt Paul owed, and Dexter replaced it with ease. Dexter made a strong effort to take care of Rita and the kids. What began as a convenient cover life slowly became something more real. Together, they started family activities like pizza night. he attended school events like Cody's speech, and he always tried to comfort the children whenever they were upset. Dexter would read to them, play with them, cook for them. He tried to behave like a normal father figure, which was something they really needed, and it made Rita's life so much better. And after Paul died in prison, Dexter even went to the funeral to support Rita and her children during that incredibly emotional time. Showing up for Rita's kids was just one of the ways Dexter proved how much he cared about her. One of the clearest examples of how seriously he took their safety came when he killed Nathan Martin. Martin started stalking Astor and taking creepy pictures of her. Even though Martin didn't technically meet the strict criteria of the code, Dexter murdered him anyway, and even stole his milk to bring back to Rita and the kids. If he hadn't just strangled a pedophile, it would have been a really wholesome dad moment. And then there was Dexter's decision to propose to Rita, just another sign that the relationship wasn't just a disguise anymore. Marriage meant committing his life to Rita, her children, and eventually their son Harrison. For someone who believed himself incapable of real love, that proposal suggested Dexter may not have been totally correct about that. Rita brought out a brand of reality so rare for Dexter that he barely understood it himself. Their relationship could have been one for the ages, but we all know that could never happen. His emotional detachment made things very difficult for them to ever fully thrive as a couple. Even when he tried to act like a loving partner, Dexter's inner monologue revealed that he saw emotional moments as performances he had to put on, rather than feelings he ever actually experienced. Rita always opened up about her feelings, good or bad, but Dexter always struggled to do the same for her. Despite all of his efforts to keep them separate, Dexter's secret life as a killer constantly sabotaged what he had with Rita. Late-night disappearances, strange explanations, and emotional distance was the norm. He was constantly gaslighting her. There was endless lying about where he was and what he was doing. These lies left Rita confused and heartbroken on the regular. She could sense something was wrong, but could never quite understand what it was. Things became especially toxic when Dexter claimed to have a drug addiction to explain away all of his shifty behavior. He started spending a lot of time with Lila after that, and soon their relationship spiraled into a quasi-affair that devastated Rita. And even after she continued to forgive and accept him, Rita was still put on the back burner constantly. Dexter repeatedly missed important family moments to answer to his dark passenger. He nearly skipped Paul's funeral because he was out all night killing and disposing of someone. He missed out on getting ice cream with the kids just to see about Lila after she burned down her own apartment. He even showed up late to their very first Thanksgiving as a family because he was preoccupied with the family of Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Those things add up and can chip away at even the strongest relationships. And Dexter constantly brought other dangers to their lives. Lila was extremely dangerous, and Dexter should have known that from the beginning. She was a recovering addict with an obsessive and controlling personality. She broke into Rita's home on 2 different occasions, and the second time, she drugged their babysitter, kidnapped Astor and Cody, and nearly killed them in a fire. And during his unexpected partnership with Miguel Prado, Prado manipulated and lied to Rita. While hiding his own violent ambition, Dexter let him get so close that he even invited Miguel to be his best man at the wedding. Even after Miguel was dead, his unstable brother Ramon was still an issue. He stormed Dexter and Rita's rehearsal dinner with a gun, threatening to kill Dexter in front of everyone. All of that traumatic bullshit happened to Rita because of Dexter's selfish choices. And Dexter's most devastating failure came from his obsession with Arthur Mitchell. By delaying Arthur's death while studying him, Dexter gave him plenty of time to strike back. Arthur eventually tracked down their home, found Rita, and murdered her there. In the end, Dexter's double life destroyed his relationship with Rita and the entire life he'd built with her. Lila West and Dexter's fling may have been brief, but it still had a major impact. Again, Lila was obsessed with Dexter and would go to any length to keep him in her life. She was a problem, and it didn't take Dexter long to figure that out. But despite being a psycho he'd be better off without in the long run, it's easy to see why he was drawn to her in the beginning. She and Dexter definitely had their moments. At first, Lila seemed like the perfect person for Dexter. She could sense that something darker was going on beneath the surface, and instead of pushing him to change, she leaned into it. That was the hook. For the first time in his life, Dexter felt like someone might actually accept him as he was. Lila didn't require him to be normal, and she didn't question habits. In fact, she encouraged him to stop hiding and embrace what he really was. To Dexter, someone who had spent his entire life pretending to be something he wasn't, that kind of acceptance was intoxicating, and their chemistry was insanely. For a brief moment, Dexter even wondered if someone like Lila, someone who embraced darkness instead of fighting it, might actually be a better match for him than Rita. How wrong he was! Lila may have been certifiably nuts, but she actually tried to help Dexter in her own twisted way. She pushed him to confront Jimenez, one of his mother's killers, and she comforted him when he struggled with killing him. She made him think about himself in a new way, less as a monster or a mistake, but as someone more worthy of acceptance than he ever thought he was before. Who wouldn't gravitate towards someone who brought them that feeling? Physically, Lila was stunning, but she was seductive in ways far more dangerous than that. The more time Dexter spent with Lila, the clearer it became that she wasn't accepting his darkness, she was feeding it and feeding off of it. She wasn't interested in balance or control. She believed Dexter should give in completely to his urges. She started trying to pull him away from his life with Rita. Lila didn't want to share Dexter with anyone else. Rita, Deb, even Cody and Aster. She wanted to consume him entirely, to have him all to herself. So when Dexter began pulling away from her and trying to fix things with Rita, Lila responded the way only Lila would, burning down her own apartment. She tried to spin the situation to get sympathy and keep Dexter emotionally invested in her. It was dramatic, manipulative, and deranged. And somehow, that was just the warm-up. After burning her home down didn't work as well as she hoped, Lila tried framing Angel for sexual assault, she started stalking Dexter, and even murdered Sergeant Dokes. And let's not forget that she tried to murder 2 kids. All of this, just to get Dexter. She saw the monster inside of him and wanted to set it free before she even knew what it was. And for Dexter, that was something far more dangerous than rejection. For once, the deterioration of a relationship wasn't totally Dexter's fault. Lila represented a future where Dexter was the worst version of himself. She lived without rules, without empathy, and without restraint. How reckless she was, the things that she was willing to do, the lengths she was willing to go in order to get what she wanted. It all made her unappealing to Dexter, as well as a liability. He didn't appreciate her using the people in his life as pawns in her little game. And Dexter would never hurt children, and he hated anyone that did. And despite the fact that he needed Dokes out of his life, even Dexter wasn't evil enough to just kill him for convenience. She was willing to embrace the fact that Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher. But Lila was so vile and volatile that even Dexter, a prolific serial killer, couldn't look past her misdeeds. And he isn't blameless himself in all of this. In many ways, Dexter was still very responsible for so much of what happened with Lila. If he hadn't been a liar and a killer, he would have never met her in the first place. If he wasn't constantly looking for someone who accepted his monstrous side, he wouldn't have been drawn to her in the first place. And if he hadn't been trying to frame Dokes as the butcher, Lila never would have had the opportunity to kill him, yet again. It's Dexter's life as a killer that guided him into an unhealthy relationship that was rooted in lies, destined for failure, and resulted in the death of an innocent person. Not all of his relationships were as rocky as these first 2, but eventually even those would fall apart too. The relationship Dexter formed with Lumen Pierce was one of the strangest he ever found himself in, and yet surprisingly, it was also one of the healthiest connections Dexter ever had. It wasn't built as a domestic cover story like his relationship with Rita, or lies and obsession like when he was with Lila. Instead, he and Lumen bonded because they both understood being traumatized and the feeling of revenge. That sounds pretty tumultuous, but somehow it worked, at least for a little while. Because of what Lumen went through with the Barrel Girls gang, Dexter ended up showing some of his most supportive and protective behavior we'd ever seen from him. First, he saved her life, he didn't have to spare Lumen. And considering what he did to his own brother, what he was willing to do to Dokes, and what he would later try to do to Maria, that was pretty considerate. And to earn her trust and help her get back to her normal life, Dexter did some pretty nice things for her. Even though she refused to take it, he brought her antibiotics to help heal the wounds the Barrel Girls gang gave her. He found the hotel she was staying at in Miami before she was abducted and paid off her bill there. He also got her luggage back, which also had the last letter from her parents in it, and returned it to her. He encouraged her to move forward after what happened to her, and even bought her a plane ticket so she could get back to her family. Sure, most of this was probably done just so she wouldn't expose him, but the lengths Dexter went to help Lumen recover also indicating deeper. He didn't have to do half of that. And again, he could have just killed her. Instead, he nursed her back to health and helped her learn to trust someone again. Before she even meant to, Lumen was bringing out some of the best in Dexter. For her part, Lumen protected Dexter's secret. She watched him kill Boyd Fowler, and based on her feelings towards men at the time, no one could have blamed her if she turned Dexter in as soon as she got the chance. He tried to hide the full details of what he was from her, but she figured it out eventually. Even then, she accepted Dexter. Not just because she needed him to get back at the men who abused her, but also because on some level she understood and respected it. She saw Dexter's darkness as a means to get rid of some of the worst people in the world. He may have comforted her first, but she returned that gesture in due time. Dexter actually felt safe with Lumen, and for good reason. Unlike Dexter's previous relationships, this one was built on honesty. Lumen knew exactly who Dexter was. No lies or aliases or cover stories. No, with Lumen, Dexter was completely exposed. For the first time in Dexter's life, he wasn't hating his dark passenger at all because he was finally in the presence of someone who understood it. Lumen had a darkness all her own after what Jordan Chase and his goons did to her. She was determined to get revenge, and Dexter guided her through the process of tracking down the men who tried to kill her. He taught her how to stay calm, how to stalk and vet targets accurately, and how to channel her rage into something focused instead of letting her anger control her. Throughout that entire process, they developed a kind of intimacy completely unique to them. And Dexter's life as a father wasn't an issue either. Lumen was great with Harrison and even helped with Aster when she found herself in a bad situation with a friend from Orlando. It really seemed like they could have been endgame. This was another relationship that Dexter isn't solely responsible for ending. Everything fell apart after they finally killed Jordan Chase, the last living member of the Barrel Girls gang. Lumen did the deed herself, and at that moment, something inside her changed. The darkness that had been driving her was finally gone. Her darkness was fueled by the need to get revenge on every man who raped and tortured her, and with Chase dead, she achieved that, so the urge to kill faded away. And when it disappeared, so did her biggest connection with Dexter. Lumen didn't have the same need to kill that Dexter is cursed with. His darkness was lifelong, and hers was long gone. Lumen wanted to leave Miami and every terrible thing that happened there behind. She wanted to restart and live a normal life, something Dexter encouraged her to do from the start. And she knew that a normal life would never be possible. She was in love with a serial killer. That was the tragedy of Dexter and Lumen. They worked incredibly well as partners because they were united by a shared purpose. Dexter helped Lumen reclaim her power, and Lumen gave Dexter the rare experience of having a relationship built on honesty. It may not seem like Dexter's fault this time after all. Lumen said she accepted it. But Dexter's need to kill was still ultimately what kept them apart. Lumen said she knew he couldn't stop, and he didn't even say that he would try, even knowing it meant she would leave. He chose his dark passenger and let Lumen walk away. Just like in everything other part of his life up to that point, Dexter's dark passenger came before keeping Lumen by his side. To be fair, Dexter probably thought he was doing the right thing. The last woman he loved died because of his compulsions. Did he really want to sit around and let the same thing happen to Lumen? After all, so much of why he was helping her in the first place was to make up for not being able to save Rita. Regardless, it was still Dexter's need to kill that made their goodbye inevitable in the end. Hannah McKay then. There was Hannah McKay. She and Dexter had a bit of a whirlwind romance after he spared her from dying on his table. Hannah was a killer, but unlike Dexter, she had no code. She started as a thrill killer with her older boyfriend Wayne in her teenage years, but by the time she was an adult, Hannah evolved into a killer for convenience. She likely killed her first husband and the old woman that ran the plant nursery before her. She also had confirmed kills, and that's what landed her on Dexter's table in the first place. It didn't make sense, she fit the code, but Dexter was drawn to her. He couldn't bring himself to kill her, and within a few weeks they were officially a couple. And they worked well together, they were immediately protective of each other. They took time to understand and respect each other's urges and motives. What made this relationship particularly unique was the fact that unlike Rita or Lumen, Hannah didn't need any lengthy justifications or emotional process. She just accepted Dexter for exactly what he was, as he was. Their romantic chemistry was also off the charts. Once they became a couple, they fell into a rhythm that felt strangely natural. They cooked dinner together, learned about each other's families, and even fantasized about building a life away from Miami. Hannah was also good with Harrison, and he liked her too. Everything seemed to be going so perfectly that Dexter began seriously considering the possibility of having a future with someone for the first time since Lumen left. Dexter obviously loved Hannah. She was the first woman who made Dexter break his own code, and he did it more than once for her. The first time was when he let her off the table, the second was when he killed her father. Clint McKay was threatening to release information that could get Hannah thrown in jail if she didn't give him $10,000. He had been treating Hannah like garbage for her whole life, and he was never going to leave her alone as long as he could use her easy money. That's when Dexter decided to act. Clint wasn't a killer, he shouldn't have been a target for Dexter, but by killing him, Dexter showed just how far he was willing to go to keep Hannah safe. There's no doubt that he would do almost anything for her. But one thing he wouldn't do is let her hurt Deb. Their relationship first fell apart when Deb tried to kill Deb. Hannah went after Deb because she saw her as a threat to her relationship with Dexter. Hannah really fucked up there. Dexter is insanely protective of Deb, and he would do anything in his power to keep her safe. And that meant turning Hannah over to the police for murder. Even after those major betrayals, they still loved each other. So when Hannah broke out of jail and tracked Dexter down, it wasn't long until they were back in a relationship. It's pretty unbelievable that Dexter would cheat with someone who tried to kill Deb, lied to him about it, and then gaslit him about it. But he was still drawn to her. They made plans to run away to Argentina together with Harrison. Dexter quit his job and put his apartment on the market. Hannah drained her accounts and booked their flights. They may have lived happily ever after if Deb hadn't died. Dexter saw Deb's death as his fault. If he hadn't been tracking Oliver Saxon, Deb would have never been in his crosshairs. After Rita, Dexter struggled with the idea of whether he could be close to someone without them getting hurt. Now, with Deb dead, he wasn't torn about it anymore. He knew everyone he loved would die if they stayed near him. He sent Hannah and Harrison ahead of him to Argentina and then decided to let them go completely. When he faked his death and moved up north, it may have seemed like he was choosing his dark passenger again, but Dexter actually gave up killing when he got to Oregon. This time, the end of the relationship felt more like punishment and self-sacrifice than selfishness. Dexter gave up the life he wanted so that Hannah and Harrison could have the lives he thought they deserved. Angela Bishop at first, it seemed like Dexter and Angela actually stood a chance. For nearly a decade, Dexter had been living under the alias Jim Lindsay in the quiet town of Iron Lake, trying to keep his dark passenger buried. Angela, the town's chief of police, gave something to Dexter that he'd never actually had before: a stable, low-drama relationship that didn't involve any killing, at least for a while. One of their best dynamics was how naturally they fit into each other's lives. Angela wasn't drawn to danger or chaos the way some of Dexter's previous partners had been. She was grounded, practical, and deeply committed to her community. That stability was comforting and helped Dexter keep up the low-key life he wanted after fleeing Miami. Instead of juggling alibis or hiding secret investigations into killers he planned to take out, Dexter was living a quiet life in a small town, working a simple job at a local shop, and dating someone who was emotionally healthy and genuinely cared about him. Another thing that made their relationship work was how supportive Ann could be. When Dexter's son, Harrison Morgan, suddenly showed up in Iron Lake after years of being separated from his father, Angela welcomed him into her home without hesitation. Even though Jim, had been hiding the fact that he had a son from her, Angela didn't treat Harrison like a burden or a complication. She forgave Jim and treated Harrison like family. For Dexter, who had spent years convinced he ruined the lives of everyone around him, that kind of understanding meant a lot to him. It gave him hope. And Dexter really respected Angela. She was a sharp investigator with strong morals. She was dedicated to solving cases and getting justice, and Dexter admired all of that about her. Watching Angela work probably reminded Dexter of the detectives he had spent years working alongside at Miami Metro, too. She didn't know that he used to be a blood spatter analyst, but their conversations about her work brought them closer together anyway, creating a sense that they were partners in more ways than one. They had fun together, too. Angela even got Dexter to dance. For a moment there, it seemed like he, Harrison, Angela, and her daughter Audrey could actually become one happy family right there in Iron Lake. But of course, this is Dexter we're talking about, so the cracks in the relationship were bound to show up sooner or later. The biggest problem was the same one that destroyed nearly every relationship Dexter had: lies. Again, Angela believed she was dating a quiet local named Jim Lindsay. In reality, she was dating one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. That secret alone meant the relationship was always living on borrowed time. The unraveling started slowly, but as usual, it all went south because Dexter killed again. When he murdered Matt Caldwell, the investigation into his disappearance led Angela to the truth. Pretty soon, she discovered that Jim Lindsay was actually Dexter Morgan, a supposedly dead blood spatter analyst from Miami. Once Angela started pulling on that thread, everything began to collapse. She may have been able to overlook the fact that Dexter hid his son from her, but lying about his entire identity was a little harder for her to accept. She started to trust him less and less, and before long, everything he did seemed suspicious to her. One of the most devastating moments came when Angela realized Dexter might be connected to the Bay Harbor butcher case. As a cop, she couldn't ignore the evidence piling up in front of her. The man she trusted, possibly loved, was suddenly the prime suspect not only in Matt's disappearance, but in a series of brutal murders stretching back years. Their dynamic flipped overnight. and all of the chemistry that once made their relationship feel real turned into pure tension. Instead of partners, they became hunter and prey. Dexter tried to maintain control of the situation, but unlike most of the people in Dexter's life, Angela wasn't easily manipulated. Her instincts as a detective were too strong. One of the main reasons the relationship was doomed was because Angela represented the exact opposite of Dexter's worldview. She believed deeply in the law, accountability, and justice through the system. We all know Dexter didn't share those sentiments. She may not have had any hard proof yet, but once she understood what Dexter truly was, there was no path back. Angela didn't try to rationalize Dexter's actions the way others had. When she thought she had enough evidence, she arrested him right in the middle of her own kitchen. That moment perfectly summed up why their relationship had to end eventually. They failed because the life they had together was built on a lie too big to go on forever. For a while, Angela Bishop may have been the closest Dexter ever came to living honestly, even if he had to do it as Jim. Unfortunately, that wasn't honest enough, and a stable relationship was the one thing Dexter Morgan could never truly offer. Despite 10 years of his best efforts, Dexter just couldn't keep his dark passenger under control. If he had, there would have been no investigation, and Angela would have stayed oblivious to the most damning lies he was telling. Instead, it all went to shit. Dexter was left bleeding to death in the snow, and Angela was forced to abandon her life in Iron Lake to protect herself and her daughter. The Dark Passenger led to the death of Matt Caldwell, the death of Dexter and Angela's relationship, and before everything was said and done, it almost led to the death of Dexter himself. Dexter has tried everything, but so far none of his relationships have gone the distance. And at the center of almost every failed relationship in Dexter's life was the same force, his Dark Passenger. For years, he believed the only way to control it was by using the code like Harry taught him to. Sure, the code allowed Dexter to kill, survive, and avoid getting caught, but it also ensured that his personal relationships would always be built on secrecy, manipulation, and impossible choices. Dexter's marriage to Rita was built on a lie from the very beginning. At first, she was just the perfect cover to help him project the image of normalcy. Over time, however, Dexter developed genuine affection for her and her children. The problem was that the Dark Passenger never allowed him to truly prioritize that family life. They hadn't even been married a year when they started undergoing intense marriage counseling. Dexter constantly disappeared, lied about his whereabouts, and put himself and his family in dangerous situations. His undying need to kill led to Rita's murder, but even without Arthur Mitchell, it would have fallen apart eventually anyway. The Dark Passenger didn't just strain their marriage, it directly caused it to end in the most permanent way possible. Lila embraced Dexter's darkness too enthusiastically. She encouraged his impulses and wanted him to abandon the code entirely. Instead of helping him maintain control over his urges, she pushed him toward chaos and destruction. But the Dark Passenger is Dexter's alone, and his need to control it was in direct conflict with Lila's desire to unleash it. It made the relationship unstable and unsustainable. With Lumen Pierce, the Dark Passenger actually helped create the strongest bond Dexter had ever experienced up to that point. For a brief moment, Dexter had a partner who knew the truth about him and accepted it. Lumen understood his Dark Passenger, and for a while she even relied on it, but that didn't last forever. It couldn't. She wanted to be normal and safe, and Dexter wanted to keep killing. The Dark Passenger remained a permanent fixture in his life, which meant that Lumen never could. Dexter's relationship with Hannah McKay came closer than any of his other ones had to surviving the Dark Passenger's effect. Hannah was a killer herself and accepted Dexter without judgment. But even that connection was poisoned by the reality of his violent world. Dexter may have actually loved Hannah, and that meant he couldn't let her become another indirect victim of his Dark Passenger. So he chose to disappear rather than risk destroying Hannah and his son the way he had destroyed so many others. The point is that time and time again, the Dark Passenger reared its ugly head in Dexter's relationships, and every time it did, they fell to pieces. It really is the one common thread, though, all of them. Rita could never know about it, Lila was consumed by it, Lumen had to run from it, Hannah had to be spared from it, and Angela wanted to destroy it. None of those scenarios were going to work in a loving relationship with a healthy foundation. The code kept Dexter from being overtaken by the Dark Passenger, but the Dark Passenger was always going to overtake his connections, and not just the romantic ones. Dexter's Dark Passenger code combo also sabotaged his friendships. His partnership with Miguel Prado ended because Miguel didn't respect the code and began using murder for personal revenge. And before that, Dexter's biological brother, Brian Moser, wanted Dexter to embrace his darkness completely. Dexter ultimately chose the code over brotherhood both times, forcing him to kill the only person who fully understood his circumstances. But the most heartbreaking casualty of the Dark Passenger was Dexter's relationship with his sister, Deb. For most of their lives, Deborah saw Dexter as the one person she could always trust. So when she discovered his secret, her entire sense of reality collapsed. She was forced to choose between her moral beliefs and her love for her brother. That internal conflict ultimately destroyed her emotionally and professionally, proving that Dexter's Dark Passenger poisoned even the most important bond he'd ever created. The Dark Passenger defined Dexter's life. It gave him somewhere to place the rage he felt for what happened to his family when was a child, and when paired with the code, it gave him structure and a twisted sense of justice. Unfortunately, it also ensured that every meaningful relationship he formed was doomed to fail, crushed under the pressure of an urge he has never managed to outrun. But what do you think? Is Dexter's Dark Passenger to blame for all of his failed relationships, or is it just a convenient excuse he hides behind, so that he never has to accept responsibility alone? Will Dexter Resurrection finally present him with a partner that can handle his truth? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comment. And if you liked this breakdown, check out our video ranking every Dexter villain by intelligence. Don't fail to slash that subscribe button before you go. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.